My daughter-in-law hid something in my garage. Then she called the police on me. Just take the blame, my son said. But he didn't know what my lawyer had ready. The handcuffs were tighter than I expected. Cold metal biting into my 67-year-old wrists, while Mrs. Gutierrez from next door peeked through her blinds like she was watching her favorite telenovela. 43 years I'd lived on Maple Street, and now I was being walked to a police car like some common criminal. Dolores Kowalski, you're under arrest for possession of methamphetamine with intent to distribute. Intent to distribute. At my age, the only thing I intended to distribute was Christmas cookies and maybe some unsolicited advice about proper lawn care. But there I was, bent over the hood of a squad car while Officer Blake read me my rights. This has to be a mistake, I kept saying, but the baggie of white powder they'd found in my nightstand drawer said otherwise. How it got there was another story entirely, though I was starting to piece that puzzle together. It all started 6 months ago when Stanley passed. 42 years of marriage ended with a long battle against pancreatic cancer that drained our savings faster than water through a sieve. Between the experimental treatments insurance wouldn't cover and the round-the-clock care, we'd burned through our retirement fund, and then some. But you don't put a price tag on the man you love, do you? After the funeral, the house felt bigger than a cathedral and twice as quiet. Trevor, my only son, started calling every day. Ma, you shouldn't be alone so much. Kenzie thinks you should come to dinner more often. The kids miss their Nana. Kenzie, my daughter-in-law of 8 years, had always been. Well, let's just say she had strong opinions about how things should be done. When Trevor first brought her home, she took one look at our modest ranch house and asked if we'd ever considered updating our aesthetic. I'd spent 30 years making that house a home with my own 2 hands, but apparently our aesthetic wasn't quite up to her standards. Still, I tried. Lord knows I tried. When they needed help with the down payment on their McMansion in Highlands Ranch, I dipped into the emergency fund Stanley, and I had scraped together penny by penny. Just until Trevor gets his promotion, Kenzie had said, flashing that practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. The promotion came and went. The money didn't come back. Then it was the kids' private school tuition. We want them to have opportunities, Dolly. You understand. Of course I understood. I'd taught 4th grade at Lincoln Elementary for 40 years before retiring. I knew the value of a good education. So I cashed in some of Stanley's life insurance policy. After that came the seasonal storage request. Their house was apparently too small for all their Christmas decorations, Halloween stuff, Easter displays. Could we just use a corner of your garage, Dolly? You've got so much space since Stanley's workshop. Stanley's workshop, where he'd spent countless hours building birdhouses and fixing broken toys, and crafting the most beautiful jewelry box for our 25th anniversary. But it was just taking up space now, wasn't it? So I said yes. Because that's what you do for family. The boxes started showing up in February. Designer handbags still in dust covers, electronics in original packaging, clothes with tags still attached. Kenzie's really gotten into online shopping, Trevor explained when I asked. Buying stuff on sale and storing it until she needs it. Made sense, I suppose. Though I'd never seen seasonal decorations that looked quite so much like a high-end department store inventory. The boxes kept multiplying, coming and going at odd hours. Kenzie had a key to the garage, said it was easier for her to swap things out when I wasn't home. Don't want to bother you, Dolly. How considerate. But old teachers develop a sixth sense about things that don't add up. 40 years of spotting forged permission slips and identifying which student really did eat whose homework gives you certain skills. So I started paying attention. The boxes that came were always different from the boxes that left. The shipping labels had multiple addresses, some I recognized as local, others from different states entirely. And Kenzie, who'd always complained about money being tight, suddenly seemed flush with cash. New Lexus, expensive handbags, spa weekends with her girlfriends. Meanwhile, she was still hitting me up for loans. Dolly, could you help us out with the mortgage this month? Trevor's commission check was smaller than expected. That was April. By then, I'd loaned them close to $15,000 from Stanley's life insurance money. But there was something Kenzie didn't know about me. Something that came from 4 decades of dealing with sneaky kids and their creative excuses. I knew how to investigate. The phone call came at 11:30 Tuesday night. Trevor's voice was strained, desperate. Ma, listen to me carefully. The police are going to arrest you tomorrow. Kenzie, there was a mix-up with some of her business stuff. She's been helping people sell things online, and some of it might have been questionable. Questionable how? Just, Ma, please. I need you to take the blame. It's just a misdemeanor if it's small amounts. Community service, maybe probation. But Kenzie could lose the kids if this goes on her record. You wouldn't want that, would you? Take the blame. For something I didn't do. To protect the woman who'd been using my garage like her personal warehouse, and my bank account like her personal ATM. Dad would have wanted you to protect the family, Ma. You know he would. Playing the Stanley card. That hurt worse than the handcuffs. But as I sat in that holding cell, staring at gray concrete walls and breathing air that smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams, I couldn't help but smile just a little. Because what my son didn't know, what neither of them knew, was exactly what his old-fashioned mother had been up to for the past 3 months. They'd seriously underestimated their mark. The booking process was designed to strip away your dignity one piece at a time. Fingerprints, mugshot, orange jumpsuit that smelled like industrial bleach and other people's desperation. The worst part wasn't the cavity search or the cold metal bench in the holding cell. It was knowing that by now, half the neighborhood had seen me led away in handcuffs. Mrs. Gutierrez would be on the phone within minutes. By evening, every member of the Church Ladies Auxiliary would know that Dolores Kowalski, retired teacher and pillar of the community, had been arrested for dealing drugs. The same woman who'd chaperoned countless field trips and never missed a PDA meeting was now a common criminal. At least, that's what they'd think. The bail hearing was a blur of legal terminology and stern warnings about staying away from known drug dealers. Trevor posted my bail with money he claimed to have borrowed from his 401k, though I suspected it came from somewhere else entirely. He drove me home in silence, hands gripping the steering wheel like he was afraid I might jump out at a red light. Ma, you can't tell anyone about this. Not the neighbors, not Father Murphy, nobody. We need to keep this quiet until it all blows over. Blows over. Like a spring thunderstorm instead of the calculated destruction of my reputation. That evening, they insisted I come to dinner. The kids need to see you're okay, Trevor said, but I could see the real reason in his eyes. They needed to make sure I'd stay in line. Kenzie had outdone herself with the performance. Red-rimmed eyes, trembling hands, the works. She'd changed into a conservative sweater and pulled her hair back in a simple ponytail. Gone was the designer outfit she'd been wearing when she picked up the kids from school that afternoon. Dolly, I'm so sorry this happened to you, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. I had no idea someone was using our storage arrangement to hide things in your garage. When I think about how they took advantage of your kindness. The tears started right on cue. Academy Award material, really. We'll get through this as a family, she continued. Won't we, Trev? Trevor nodded earnestly. Ma, you know we'll support you no matter what. Dad always said family comes first. There it was again. Stanley's ghost being dragged into their little performance. The lawyer says if you plead guilty to simple possession, you'll probably just get probation, Kenzie said. Community service at worst. But if this goes to trial and they start digging around. She let the sentence hang there like a threat. What she didn't know was that I'd already been digging around myself. For months. It started back in March, when I'd noticed the shipping labels on some of her boxes. Return addresses from stores I'd never heard of, scattered across different states. Then there were the items themselves, luxury handbags with security tags still attached, electronics in sealed boxes with price stickers from stores in other cities. Old habits die hard, and 40 years of teaching had made me a natural detective. So I started documenting everything. Photos of the boxes before they disappeared. Screenshots of the serial numbers when I could manage it. License plates of the people who came to pick things up at odd hours. But what I'd found in that credit report changed everything. Kenzie had been sloppy with her mail. A credit monitoring service had sent her annual report to my address by mistake, probably because she'd used my garage as a shipping address so many times. I should have given it back unopened, but something about the timing bothered me. This was right around when she'd started asking for larger loans. The numbers didn't add up. According to the report, she had 17 credit cards maxed out to a total of $89,000. Her income was listed as unemployed, but somehow she was making minimum payments and funding a lifestyle that cost more than Trevor's salary. That's when I started playing dumb and paying attention. Every request for money got documented. Every story about Trevor's commission checks got verified with a quick call to his office, pretending to be confirming dinner plans. Every box that appeared in my garage got photographed from multiple angles. What my family saw was a grieving widow, lonely and eager to help. What they didn't see was a retired teacher doing what she did best, gathering evidence and building a case. The meeting with my lawyer was scheduled for Friday morning. Margaret Finch had been Stanley's estate attorney, and she'd known our family for 20 years. When I called her office and said I needed help with criminal charges, you could have heard a pin drop. "Dolly, walk me through this again," she said after I'd laid out the whole story. "Your daughter-in-law has been using your garage to store stolen merchandise, then planted drugs in your home, and had you arrested. That's exactly what happened." Margaret leaned back in her leather chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. She'd handled white-collar crime before becoming an estate attorney, and I could see the wheels turning. The good news is we have enough evidence to destroy her. The bad news is she's probably going to destroy herself before we get the chance. Margaret Finch opened the file cabinet behind her desk and pulled out a folder thick enough to choke a horse. "Before we go any further, Dolly, I need to ask you something. How long have you really known what Kenzie was up to?" I'd been dreading this question, but also looking forward to it. 3 months. Ever since I hired Jake Morrison to follow her. Margaret's eyebrows shot up. "You hired a private investigator?" "Jake's nephew was in my class 15 years ago. Sweet kid, terrible at math but great at paying attention to details. Turns out that runs in the family." I pulled out my own folder, just as thick as Margaret's. "Jake's been very thorough." The credit report mix-up had been the final straw, but it wasn't the beginning. That honor went to a piece of mail Kenzie had thrown in my trash can back in February. I'd been taking the garbage out when I noticed the envelope from something called Lucky Stars Gaming. The return address was from some online casino I'd never heard of. Kenzie didn't strike me as the gambling type, but then again, Kenzie struck me as a lot of things that were turning out to be wrong. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I steamed open the envelope. $17,000 in gambling debts. Threatening language about collection procedures. Account suspension pending payment arrangements. That's when I called Jake Morrison. "Mrs. Kowalski, your daughter-in-law is running what we call a return fraud operation," Jake had explained 3 weeks into his investigation. "She's stealing merchandise from high-end stores, then using fake receipts to return items for cash or store credit. The garage operation is just the storage and distribution center." The numbers were staggering. Over the past year, Kenzie had processed nearly $47,000 worth of stolen goods through my garage. Designer handbags, electronics, jewelry, clothes. She had contacts at stores across 3 states who were helping her create fake return transactions. But that wasn't even the worst part. "She's also been taking out loans using your address as collateral," Jake continued. "Payday loans, online lending services, even a few legitimate banks. As far as they know, she lives in your house and has been making her payments from your account." My account? The one she'd had access to ever since I'd added her as an authorized user for emergencies. The security cameras had been Jake's idea. If she's willing to plant evidence once, she'll do it again. We need to catch her in the act. So I'd had a system installed while Kenzie was at her spa weekend in Aspen. Tiny cameras in the garage, the kitchen, my bedroom, and the living room. The installation guy thought I was a paranoid old lady worried about break-ins. If only he knew. The cameras caught everything. Kenzie planting the drugs in my nightstand. Kenzie going through my mail. Kenzie photographing the inside of my house with her phone, probably for insurance fraud purposes. And most damning of all, Kenzie on the phone with someone named Marcus, discussing moving the old lady's stuff, once I was out of the picture. Margaret spread the photos across her desk like a poker hand. Mail fraud, interstate commerce violations, elder abuse, identity theft, and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances. The federal prosecutor is going to have a field day with this. "What about Trevor?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "That's where it gets complicated." Margaret pulled out another section of the file. Jake found records of a $23,000 personal loan Trevor took out last month. The collateral listed is 50% ownership of your house. My house. The one Stanley and I had paid off 15 years ago. He forged my signature? Worse. He used a power of attorney document from when your husband was in the hospital. Technically legal, but ethically. Margaret shook her head. "Dolly, your son has been lying to you about more than just his wife's shopping habits." I sat back in the leather chair, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. Trevor hadn't just been manipulated by Kenzie. He'd been an active participant in bleeding me dry. "What do you recommend?" Margaret's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "I recommend we invite them to dinner. Sunday night, your house. Tell them you want to discuss pleading guilty and get this whole mess behind you. And then, Then we show them exactly what kind of lesson a 40-year teaching veteran can deliver when she's been pushed too far. I walked out of Margaret's office with a spring in my step I hadn't felt since Stanley's funeral. For months, I'd been playing the role of the grieving, confused widow. But the truth was, I'd never felt more focused in my life. Time to teach them both a lesson they'd never forget. Sunday dinner was going to be very educational indeed. Sunday dinner started exactly as I'd planned. Kenzie arrived wearing her most demure outfit, a navy cardigan that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, but was meant to make her look like a devoted daughter-in-law. She'd even brought flowers, white lilies that matched her innocent expression. "Dolly, you look tired," she said, kissing my cheek with practiced concern. "This whole ordeal must be so stressful. But don't worry, we'll get through this together." Trevor hovered behind her like a guilty shadow, carrying a bottle of wine that still had the price tag on it. $47. Funny how money was never tight when it came to keeping up appearances. "Ma, we've been thinking," Trevor said as we sat down to the pot roast I'd spent all afternoon preparing. "Maybe you should just take the plea deal. Get this behind us, you know? Start fresh." "Start fresh," I repeated, serving myself some mashed potatoes. "That's interesting advice." Kenzie leaned forward earnestly. "We know it's not fair, but sometimes life isn't fair. The important thing is protecting the family. The children can't know their grandmother was involved in this kind of thing." I nodded thoughtfully and excused myself to get dessert. When I returned, I wasn't carrying apple pie. I was carrying 3 thick manila folders. "Before we discuss plea deals," I said, setting the folders on the table, "I thought we should talk about some other business. Starting with this." I opened the first folder and spread out a series of photographs. Kenzie's face in my garage at 2 a.m, carrying boxes. Kenzie removing security tags from designer handbags. Kenzie photographing the inside of my house. "What? Where did you get these?" Kenzie's voice had climbed an octave. "From the security cameras I had installed 6 weeks ago." I opened the second folder. "Jake Morrison is very thorough. Former police detective, you know. He's been documenting your little operation for 3 months." Trevor's wine glass slipped from his hand, red liquid spreading across my white tablecloth like blood. "But my favorite part," I continued, opening the third folder, "is this recording of your phone conversation with Marcus about moving the old lady's stuff once I was out of the picture." I pressed play on the small recorder Jake had given me. Kenzie's voice filled the dining room, discussing insurance fraud and liquidating my assets with the casual tone most people reserved for discussing the weather. Kenzie's innocent mask finally slipped. "You senile old bitch. You have no idea what you're dealing with." "Oh, but I do." I smiled, checking my watch. "I know about the $47,000 in stolen merchandise. I know about the 17 different credit cards you've maxed out using my address. I know about the gambling debts and the payday loans. And I know about the $23,000 Trevor borrowed against my house without my knowledge." Trevor's face went white. "Ma, I can explain." Can you explain how you forged documents using a power of attorney that expired when your father died? Can you explain how you've been helping your wife turn my home into a criminal enterprise? Can you explain how you looked me in the eye and asked me to plead guilty to protect the family?" The doorbell rang at exactly 7:30, just as I'd arranged. "That'll be the FBI," I said casually, standing to answer it. I timed it so we could finish dinner first. I wasn't raised to be rude to guests. What happened next was better than any soap opera. Kenzie tried to run, actually climbing over the back fence in her expensive heels before Agent Collins tackled her in Mrs. Gutierrez's rose bushes. Trevor just sat at my dining room table, crying into his hands while they read him his rights as an accessory. The neighbors came out to watch, of course. Mrs. Gutierrez had her phone out, recording everything. By tomorrow morning, everyone would know that I hadn't been the criminal after all. "Mrs. Kowalski," Agent Collins said as they led Kenzie to the car, "your evidence package was extremely thorough. We've been trying to crack this return fraud ring for months." 40 years of teaching," I told him. "You learn to document everything." After they left, I sat in my kitchen, looking at the mess on my dining room table. Red wine stains, scattered photographs, and 3 empty chairs where my family used to sit. Margaret Finch had been right about one thing. Kenzie had destroyed herself. But Trevor's betrayal cut deeper than anything his wife had done. He was my son, and he'd been willing to let me go to prison to save his own skin. My phone rang. It was Trevor, calling from the county jail. "Ma, please. I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. You have to believe me." I believe you meant every word you said about Dad wanting me to protect the family, I replied. The problem is you forgot that I'm family too. I hung up and poured myself a glass of the wine Trevor had brought. $47 for a bottle of mediocre Cabernet. Just like everything else about them. Expensive on the surface, worthless underneath. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of getting my house back. My reputation was already being restored, thanks to Mrs. Gutierrez's social media skills. And my bank account would recover once the restitution payments started rolling in. But tonight, I was just a retired teacher who'd given one final lesson about respecting your elders and the consequences of underestimating quiet women who know how to pay attention. Class dismissed.